Welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. I use the term midlife to describe all of us who are somewhere between the beginning and the end. My guest today agrees that we aren't old if we don't think we are, despite what others may think. Shayna Kaufmann researched over 600 midlife women and interviewed over 100 of them, and those numbers are international, to find out where their joys were and what kept them up at night. Their midlife experience, you might say. The responses might surprise you, but they reinforced Shayna's practice of embrace the middle. Embrace the middle. It's the name of her company, her website, and her book, and what she encourages us to do as we all challenge the menopause-centric negative midlife paradigm. Please pay attention as Shayna asks us all to stand tall, be visible, use our voices, step into our power, and claim it. Listen now. The midlife story for many of us women is similar. Family, home, job, caregiving or losing parents, empty nest, illness, either our own or friends. Menopause, it's not always kind and can be overwhelming. But have you ever stopped to realize that you are managing? You have friends in this same boat, and so many other women have come out the other side successfully. My guest today interviewed over 600 midlife women worldwide to learn our commonalities. Shayna says that's only part of the story. There is so much more. There is wisdom, there is resilience, and there is the chance to step into our most authentic selves. Her message? Embrace the middle. Her words again. Embrace the middle is about saying yes to midlife. Embrace the middle is a paradigm shift which challenges the negative, diminishing, crisis-laden narrative of midlife to be replaced with a more expansive, uplifting, and empowering perspective. And Embrace the Middle offers a method to navigate the challenges, celebrate the joys, and find power in midlife. That's the kind of positivity I can get behind, and the kind of positivity we need in our lives. Shayna Kaufmann, welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast.
Thank you so much, Agnes. I am delighted to be here. Truly.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I know what we talked about before I pressed record. Anyway, let's jump right in. Over 600 women worldwide. How did that happen? And what did your research look like?
Yeah, great question. And it wasn't, just to clarify, it was 619 who completed a survey, and it was a subset of 103 that I interviewed. So how it happened, but the data is still the data. You know, there's 619 worldwide. So how it happened is COVID happened. That was actually how this all started, because I was doing my thing like most of us, and COVID came along and said, stop everything you do. And I thought, okay, if my work has to pause, I'm going to use this opportunity to learn more about us. I knew my midlife experience. I knew those of my friends and my clients, but I really wanted a wider sample. So I sent a survey out to about 30 or 40 women, really honing in on not just what are the pain points of midlife, but also what are the good parts and what tools help us get through it. So my goal was to, have 30 or 40 women complete that and explore that data. And for whatever reason, the survey spread like wildfire across the globe, across the continent. I mean, it was incredible, the outpouring of response to it. And when I saw that, I was both thrilled, delighted, and perplexed with why so many were completing this survey. And then I realized that this is a large number, of women that are completing, answering these questions, but it would really be helpful to dive deeper into the stories behind the numbers and really understand on a more intimate level what these women's experiences were like. So I added that question, would you like to participate in a follow-up interview to talk about the survey? And hundreds said yes. And these are strangers, which further perplexed me. So and I can dive into any of that, but the the sum end after about 4 to 5 months was that I had a sample of 619 women around the world and one-on-one deep hour-long interviews with a subset of 103 of them, talking about all things midlife.
So what sort of countries were represented?
Every continent was represented. I had people from, let's see, I have my little book here. My little book, my big book, my Embrace the Middle book. I had people from Paris. I had people from Tel Aviv. I had people from South America. I had women from Australia. I had women from places I hadn't even heard of, Lisbon and Milan. And I was looking to actually read you some of the countries, but it was a vast sample. 100 of them were from the EU. And so the nerd part of me who was kind of thinking back to my dissertation days of doing my research was, wow, if I can get enough samples from a certain continent, then I can do more comparisons between the women from these two continents and see if there's actually cultural differences between the midlife woman experience, or if being a woman in midlife transcends cultural differences. So in the end, I had 102 from the European Union and another several hundred from North America to compare as a subset of comparisons.
Now, do you think that you said it like people are sharing, they're sending it on. Is that just well, I'm older, but the midlife time of life where women are realizing that, you know, to coin whoever said it first, we're in it to win it. Like we're going to come out the other side of this. We are living longer than we've ever lived before. So and we need to lean on each other as women. So they would just pass it around. Like, did you ever find out why it went global so big so fast?
I did, because I started asking women, and it started off with going out to dinner with a few friends and me sharing my curiosity, like you were, of I'm just so confused and delighted at the same time. Why do you think these strangers are offering to spend an hour of their time? And sometimes it was, time zones. It's early morning for me and late for them, or vice versa. Why would they want to do it? And my girlfriend looked at me across the table, straight in the eye, and she said, "It's because you asked." And I was like, "Come again?" She said, "It's because you asked. Midlife women are not often asked about our experiences. We're perceived to be less interesting. We're perceived to not have as much to offer. Perceived, I mean, that we're perceived.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
are, not the wise elder crone, nor are we the up and coming excited ones. We're the kind of smack, almost like the middle child, kind of that middle demographic that starts to become invisible," which was the theme that came up in my research of the experience. So when I started asking the interviews, "Why did you say yes?" the answers range from, "No one ever asked me about me." And it was a rare opportunity for me to actually be the focus because I'm so busy taking care of the generations on both sides of me that I seldom get airtime. Other women said, "There's not enough research about us out there. And that I feel it's a responsibility to contribute to more information about us because it's not there." And another woman said that when she completed this survey, which I explained also honed in on some of the gifts of midlife, she was delightfully surprised at how much she had grown over the decades and hadn't really paused long enough to even take stock of that. And so the interview was kind of a time for her to kind of share and explore her growth with someone else who was genuinely interested. So there are a lot of reasons, but I think that by and large, women want to support each other and we want our stories to be told.
I've had a few women on lately that have talked midlife, and that word invisible keeps on coming up. And just how what did one woman say, that in the workplace they're given projects because we know that's just a way to keep them busy until we can get rid of them. That sort of
Yeah.
thing.
And I think companies are shooting themselves in the foot that do that because they are not taking advantage of a wealth of wisdom that comes with age and experience. So,
Yeah.
the wisdom and competence that just comes from, being so good at what we do over time. So they're doing themselves and us a huge disservice by overlooking us or
When I
looking.
rule
Yeah.
the world, things will be different.
I'm into that.
Okay. Were there cultural differences?
It's so interesting. In general, the midlife experience transcends cultural differences. And on the micro level, there were a few differences. On the macro level, the answer is no. On the micro level, when you looked kind of more intimately at the data, people in some samples of women in the European Union, statistically, they had lesser financial worries than people in North America. So it was those two continents that I explored because I had sufficient numbers for it. And I made some possible reasons for that. One being it could be due to socialized medicine, where they don't have the same financial worries. It could be part of that. In Luxembourg, they pay for higher education. So financial worries was a little bit less. Certain countries had different social conversations around therapy. So countries that were very, therapy is a good thing, everyone has a therapist, no big deal, that was more comfortable. Where there's some other countries where therapy is still a stigma and it has to be hidden. And so women from some of those cultures were less likely to avail themselves of mental health services if they needed them. The EU is very menopause friendly. Not the EU, sorry, the UK is leaps and bounds ahead of North America in terms of their menopause support services. You can even get things like vaginal estradiol cream over the counter, which require a prescription here. So there were these micro differences, in certain specific areas, but the macro experience of what we're dealing with was the same, if that makes sense.
As you explained that, I thought it would be so easy to sort of go down that political path, which I'm not. But when a country actually pays for advanced, it's okay, I'm going to go there. But when a country actually pays for advanced education, or like we have socialized medicine in Canada, but there's a real shortage of medical staff, doctors, nurses, everything else. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be really easy to sort of follow up on that if you were a political junkie.
And there's one more area, I'm sorry, I forgot to
Yeah, no,
talk
no,
about
no, that's good.
was the perception of how we treat our elders. So there's certain cultures where elders are really revered for their knowledge and respected and looked up to. And then there's cultures where let's see who we can hire to take care of them because we don't want to deal with them, where the elders are more of a nuisance versus respected. And that gave women, the ones that were kind of 60s and 70s kind of starting to enter that decade, were very aware of how they're going to be perceived by society, and the ones upcoming were wondering what's going to come when I'm not an active contributor to society, instead a potential burden. So the mindset that brings as you start to enter those mature years is significant.
I have been brainwashing my daughters for decades that I'm going to be a fabulous elder and they're going to love to take care of me when I get old and frail.
You're just speaking the
um,
truth.
there you go. Wise old crone that I am. I often use the term midlife to describe myself and my peers as I've started the journey, haven't ended it yet, so I'm somewhere in the middle. How do
Yeah.
you define midlife?
I have a whole chapter on that in my book, Agnes. It's such a
Oh, okay.
nuance. It's so nuanced because most people just want a number. They want to hear
Yeah,
a
yeah.
range. The people that are on the upper traditional spectrum are like, "Am I still there?" They want that range to be higher, and the ones that are, in the 30s, like, "I want to be old, but not that old." So in the research, it's usually between 40 and 65-ish is kind of what research uses to try to
70,
put people in
70, 70,
70. I mean
70.
70. Did I say 65? I meant 70. But there's so many factors that impact what that number really is. I mean, and some of the things I talk about are these milestone experiences. Losing a parent, that could happen for some people at a tender young age. That might not happen for others until well into life. We know that when we lose a parent, we are in a different developmental period, and there's no doubting it. When we hit menopause, that is, when those fertility years or options are over, we've entered another developmental period. So there's the milestones, and there's also just our attitude of how old you think you are. And acting, are you acting according to that age? Because there is a huge, huge, correlation between, our cognitions and our behaviors. Therapy is all about cognitive behavioral. If we think that we're still in the middle, we are still in the middle. So I think it's far more nuanced than a numerical range.
And actually, in my notes here, I've got that exact comment that age is dependent on a lot of things: self perception, that you've just talked about, health,
Yeah.
environment, social norms, and ageism. Like if you're constantly told, you I was going to say it's time you're out to pasture. Another co-podcaster, Andy Lyons, her podcast is actually called "Don't Be Caged by Your Age," and she says pastures are for horses, not humans. So,
I
but
like that.
like if you're getting that message a lot, then
Yeah,
you take it on, you wear it. But and
you
then
do.
if you're in poor health, mind you, this morning I was listening to my talk radio, and what were they talking about? Something to do with Starbucks. And the announcer, and she was just clear as and forceful. She said, "I remember when, I don't know, a latte or something went up to $1.75 at Starbucks." She said,
Mm-hmm.
"And that means that I'm old." And I'm
Mm.
thinking, I remember when Starbucks was invented. Like, what does that make me? And just that, well, it's the old story of ageism is the last permissible ism that's out there. It's a form of bigotry that's allowed.
It is. Yeah. And I think in midlife, we get that intersection of sexism and ageism. So all of a sudden, we're confronted with both at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know my peers, my friends, we're all going to say bollocks to that. And we find power in the years. We've done all the things that were expected of us. We've raised families, we've had careers, we've taken care of our elders, we've seen and done a lot, and we have the wisdom that comes with that. And we have each other.
Yeah.
Now, I think my question here is, how typical did you find that? And now that, I'll go back to what I said earlier, we're living longer than any generation before us. Are we becoming the standard for advancing age?
Yeah. I'll go back to the first part of the question about how typical is that experience of having wisdom and these, other powerful,
Owning it.
powerful
Yeah.
owning it. Yes. So that was a second part of my research. So after the women and I would explore some of the pain points, which we're well aware of because society talks about them so much, we're
Yeah.
well aware of them. We would then transition to, I would say, have you experienced any positive sides to aging or midlife? And I would see visibly on Zoom muscles relax in their face, a smile open up.
Yeah.
Yes. And what I found in the research, the top three, one was wisdom. And wisdom, not just being experience, but wisdom being those lessons we extract from having, lived more, live longer. Every rotation around the globe. If we take that time to actually learn from experience, that wisdom starts to become embodied within us. In my book, I talk about, this inner wisdom, this embodied knowing. So wisdom was the top one. Second was sort of an extension of wisdom. It's our self-awareness. It's how much better we know ourselves. It's knowing firmly what our values are, what our likes and dislikes are, where our boundaries are. And with that sense of awareness and agency of who we are, we make better choices and do more things that lift us up rather than bring us down. So that was the second one. The third was a huge tie. One you mentioned is girlfriends. So that those midlife friendships that by this age are so rewarding because we know the preciousness of time and we're not going to waste it on friendships that are not mutually fulfilling. So mostly we phase out the obligatory ones, the ones, of convenience, the ones of shoulds because they have history. And we increasingly kind of, reduce those and spend more with the women that we really, really want to be with. And I see you smiling and I'm smiling because it's a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
these relationships are so much deeper because we've been through so much together that there's a depth that we just couldn't know in decades prior. Then, along with that, there were several others that kind of came close to friendships. Resilience, our ability to bounce back more because we've been through hard times and gotten through them. So we've built that muscle. Our comfort in our skin, which I always joke about, that even though our skin is more wrinkled or saggy or whatever, or there's more of it or less of it, depending on who you are, we're still more comfortable in our being, in our presence, and not sweating the small stuff as much. So really, little things that might have upended us, decades prior become like a hiccup, whatever,
Right.
in the big picture, it's just not that big of a deal. So all of this stuff is happening in midlife, but we're often so consumed by the louder challenges of physical decline and caregiving and death and loss that we lose sight of all these wonderful gifts. So my invitations to women is to really intentionally open up because they're just as much as those challenges are there. We just have to be mindful of them in a real intentional way.
I think you may have segued me into my next question,
That was a
and
long
because
that
you
was a long answer. So
no, but you
how
came
many?
to that, maybe a bit more skin than we used to. Why do so many women feel the need to try and not age? And I realize it's a multi-million dollar industry for the businesses of anti-aging. Why do women buy into it?
I think fewer bite into it than we realize because surprisingly, the top challenges in my data point of 620 women worldwide did not include physical appearance challenges. That was close to the bottom. Honestly, it's not that we don't want to still look our best and feel our best, but we're not buying into this whole culture of youthful beauty being the only standard of beauty. And it's hard to go up against because it's being,
Yeah,
promoted to us as these products that are gonna, change our lives. But I think increasingly, first of all, they don't know us because this is not our biggest deal. Our biggest deal is that our bodies are declining and our loved ones are dying. That's really, and, or we're caregiving. That's our biggest pain points, not our parents. And I think there's more of a trend to go gray. There's more of a trend to, I think there's more, and we have a lot of pro aging activists out there that are helping us push this message along that beauty comes in all forms and that mature beauty is different than youthful beauty, but it's still beauty. So I think the tide is changing a bit, and I think we can blame society and the lifelong emphasis on physical appearance as the problem, not really how we're naturally conditioned. It's what we're kind of socially conditioned to believe, if that makes sense.
and I suppose part of the solution is when we are on social media and inundated with those ads of, this cream will do this and, this bra will make you look like that. And who knows what else, hair color and clothing and how to lose 20 pounds in 20 days, all that sort of stuff is just scroll on by. It's just like,
Scroll on
you're
by
not
and
going to
start
get
to
rich off me.
No, and start to follow people like Jamie Lee Curtis, who's such an advocate, or Maria Shriver, or all these other women who are pro aging and pro aging gracefully. There's a lot out there, and
Yeah.
so it's just, I think I don't know how the algorithm of social media, but I think the more we start to align with those people, then the more we're then I guess maybe less targeted by some of these ridiculous ads that
Yeah.
are not
Yeah.
going to bring us peace of mind. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, we've spoken about the wisdom of being this age is you can't lose 120 pounds in 60 days.
No, never could.
No,
You never
no,
could. They just made
you
us
know,
think we could.
yeah, exactly.
No,
So,
it's definitely
yeah,
harder. Yeah.
yeah. I have a
Yeah.
recurring ad on one of my games that I play. It's just like, oh, go away. Now, we've touched on it. The discussion needs to include menopause.
Yeah.
I was so excited when you said that the UK is actually really forward thinking.
They are.
'Cause it's still swept under the carpet in so many countries.
Yeah.
I've noticed even in North America here, there's more and more women saying it's a fact.
Yeah.
Employers deal with it. My family deal with it, all that sort of stuff. What do you have to say about that? Like, tell us more about Britain. Like, what do they do over there?
Well, they have like workplace areas that are more workplace friendly for menopause. They have resources galore. They have organizations, more organizations than we do. They have, over the counter products that require prescription here. So I think, and by virtue of all of that being so public, it means the public conversation around it is less hush hush than it is in North America. Um, Here, the tide is just here, as in I'm in the United States, but here the
Yeah.
tide is just starting to change, and change. I think we're having a moment right now where there is much more conversation around it, where that whole, history of shh, don't talk about menopause. Shh, where that our mother's generation, we're not we and the generation that I grew up in, that we don't talk about it. That is shifting in a big way because women are talking about it publicly. It's becoming less pathologized than it used to be. There's incredible books coming out on menopause. There's documentaries. There was just recently a documentary that came out on World Menopause Day, which, by the way, there's a World Menopause Day, which I didn't know until recently, on October 18th. And a documentary called The M Factor came out. And doctors, for the first time, medical doctors can get CMU, continuing medical education credits for watching this documentary. That's huge.
Wow.
That's huge. And
Yeah.
women, and I think it's incumbent on us to continue to have these public conversations, not just amongst our friends, but amongst generations and amongst genders, and have it be a normal conversation that's not embarrassing or shameful or pathologized, because every woman's going to go through it. So it is changing. But I think it also falls on us to continue. My daughters will know a lot about menopause. They will be extremely informed, as does my husband. So I think the tide is really shifting in a way, but we're coming out of, lifelong conditioning of we just don't talk about that. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
something we talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's shifting in a big way.
Do you think that if we can get menopause accepted as just part of life, and it's a part of life for mid-age to older women, do you think there's a possibility that older women will become more visible and people will realize that these are real people with real value and really great stories or funny stories, like they're really valuable people? Do you think it can help turn that tide?
So is your question that do I think the
Well,
acceptance of menopause as a natural thing and
well,
as a
because and
natural,
it's getting airtime. I mean, we know it's a
yeah,
natural thing, but because it's getting airtime and women are standing up and saying, "Look at this is a fact of life, we're good for more than just making babies, and this is part of that process." Like, will that help to, I guess, just put a little spotlight on older women
I think
in
it
a
will
positive
because
way?
I think there's this old belief, where our child rearing years are over, so our value's done, right? And we're saying no, no, man, no, sir, is what we're saying.
Yeah,
We are just beginning, and we're going through a physical transformation, and there's a lot of power that comes on the other side of that. And watch out, because not only, you know, have our kids, if we chose to have them or could have them, now they're launching, and now we're wiser and older, and now we get to be front and center with a lot of power and experience behind our ears. Watch us. Just watch us. So I think instead of menopause kind of being the end, I think menopause is the transition, as they call it, to the next phase, to this phase of Christian Northrup wrote in her book, menopause, the wisdom years. It's those wisdom years. It's that entry into, I think power and agency and strength. I know going through a lot of the things that come with middle age, some of the more challenging parts, such as my parents passing and my own menopause experience and my daughter's launching, getting through that and riding that wave instead of dodging it and coming out the other side was empowering and liberating at the same time, because I found a strength that I just didn't know existed within me. And that's me
Yeah.
now on the other side of that. And there's something really cool about that.
Well, and all the energy we put into, I mean, I've realized a lot of women out there did not have children for one reason or another, but
Yeah.
the energy we put into raising families and helping raise other people's families, like all that networking that we did, now that that is 10, 20 years behind us, we still have all that energy to put to other purposes and uses, so yeah, it
And look at what we did when we had them in the mix at the same time. Look at
yeah,
all the pots that we had going. And now, those responsibilities are a little bit lessened. We've got caretaking, but those responsibilities are lessened, and we could make a lot happen. We're doing a lot. So I agree with you 100%, Agnes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's our time. It's our time.
There you go. And I'm claiming it.
I'm claiming it. I want women to do that. I want them to own it
Yeah.
and to
Oh, yeah.
own that's my invitation in my book is own it and step into your power. It's yours to be claimed and you've earned it. You
Yeah.
earned it. So you have to claim it and
Yeah.
step into it.
And I think we've got to watch our language too, because I've recently had some fairly serious knee problems, which I'm coming out the other side of now. But I know, my grandchildren were used to grandma doing this or grandma doing that. And I'm going like, okay, it's not that I would not use the OLD word. It's no, grandma's knee is really sore. When
Yeah.
it's better, I'll go back to doing whatever, what they want me to do. But, it's just about injury or about an incident. It's not old age or something.
And it doesn't define you.
No,
So
exactly.
I have knee injuries as well. And so it doesn't, yes, we have knee stuff, but grandma's still grandma.
Yeah.
Grandma, it's not just there's my knee impaired grandma. No, here's your grandma that has some knee things going on, but it's the still same grandma that can read to you and help bathe you and help do all the other fun things we do together. We just not lift you up.
Well, you see, my eldest grandson is coming up 15. So I just actually turn it around and say, Guess what? You get to do these jobs now. Go
Yeah.
get grandma a cup of tea, and I'm just going to sit here and watch you." I'm just
Yeah.
joking. He takes it in good humor. I do say that, but he takes it in good humor.
Yeah.
Were there any other, like we've talked about difficulties? I'm going to go back there for just a second. Are there any of the difficulties that we haven't talked about that women reported? We haven't
Yeah.
really touched on?
Yeah. So we talked about physical decline. That was number one. Number two was death and loss. And it's often in these middle, and we don't talk about that enough because it's often in these middle decades when we're first confronted with not just if our parents are still around, that obvious decline, and often the first time we might lose a parent or two. And even if we don't lose them to death, a lot of times we're losing the parent that we knew as they decline, and the
Right.
roles are shifting from them caring for us to us caring for them. And there's some of the more subtle losses. My knees, I was a runner for 40 years and I'm bone on bone. I had to retire from running. That was a huge loss for me that I had to grieve. It was just part of my identity and my lifestyle, and that was a loss. So we have those, and we have unexpected losses. I think few of us anticipated losing friends so young, and it happens more and more. I lost a sibling at 60. Who thinks about that? You kind of know if the universe goes in order, we will lose our parents at some point, but we're not really thinking that we're going to lose friends and siblings, at such young ages. So death and loss was a big one. And then the third one was the sandwich crunch, the sandwich double caregiving, which is sometimes kids and grandkids. Sometimes it's parents and kids. Sometimes it's all four generations, multiple generations. And that crunch of the emotional, the practical, and often financial hardship that can place on us being in the middle, literal middle of that. So those were the top three that really jumped out. And it was so interesting because neither physical appearance nor menopause ranked up there, even though those are the things that are being marketed to us as our biggest pain points. They weren't up there. But I'll add a clarifying note to that, though. Some of the physical complaints that women talked about when I kind of went to parse the data further, because that it didn't quite make sense to me why menopause would be so low. And so I was looking at the data more intricately, and what I saw was some of the things that women complained about, such as joint aches, anxiety, palpitations, impaired sleep, brain fog. A lot of these common things, women were not educated to connect that to menopause or potentially to menopause. So, because of the lack of education in the medical community, that then became we were less educated. We are only finding out now when we're post-menopause, some of us, I am, that stuff that we complained about a decade or two ago that we thought we were sick with other things, something's wrong with us, was part of menopause.
And some of the women that I've interviewed about menopause, we've talked about the fact that, as you just said earlier, we are going to be talking to our daughters about this,
Absolutely.
so there are no surprises. And when they have, whether it's brain fog or hair loss or poor sleep or whatever, it's okay. I know what's going on here. Which is not to say don't go see a doctor if something's serious,
Right.
but at least you can be a bit more relieved that if the doctor says there's nothing seriously wrong with you, like you don't have a serious health issue, okay, this is how my body is dealing with menopause. So, like at least you tick one concern off the list.
Absolutely. A big worry. I thought I
Yeah.
had early onset dementia because my mother had dementia. I really did. And I went to my doctor in my early 40s and really worried. And she was like, "Oh, but you're working and you've got kids and you're stretched. And I'm sure it's just, you're just, maxed out." And this went on for years. And I ended up getting my own neurological evaluation. Everything was fine, but only to find out when I'm way past this that was part of menopause. And I would have had so much less fear and concern had that been normalized for me way back then. And it was my doctor's fault. She didn't get the training either about it. But doctors now hopefully will. And women
Yeah.
now will be hearing these kinds of conversations to know that likely nothing's wrong with you. This is a normal part of a transitional process of your hormones going haywire
Yeah. Yeah.
and diminishing.
Whew. Oh, you were talking about loss earlier,
Yeah.
and I lead a seniors exercise class. These women in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we've been together for over 30 years, and we've lost people along the way. A number of these women have lost husbands,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting to see how quickly they come back to class because it's a safe place of other women, some of whom are in the exact same boat,
Yeah.
and they know that there's just this blanket of warmth that comes over them, as people understand and protect and help and do whatever needs to be done. um, so once
Yeah.
again, that
That's beautiful.
sisterhood, I guess. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sisterhood and that unspoken bond.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain it because they know it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
there's
for
a
sure.
comfort in that. The common humanity of that is comforting, that you're not alone in this deep pain that
Yeah.
comes with losing a spouse.
Yeah, especially after 50, 60 years of marriage.
Yeah.
It's yeah, pretty
Yeah.
upsetting. I'm gonna go somewhere else with that thought. It's actually gonna lighten it up. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so give us some more positives. We are the wise women of this
We're
globe.
we are wise, we are strong, we are resilient, we are less fearful. We don't worry about that little stuff anymore because we have perspective. We're more confident. We have better boundaries. We know when to say no, and we have more confidence saying yes. Both of those are huge growth things. So there's a beautiful ease of being, easier way of being in life, even amidst at the same time that we're going through loss and caregiving. They're not parallel paths, they're intersecting roads, and they're both always there. So there's a lot of good stuff. And my invitation to women, and what I talk a lot about in my Embrace the Middle book, is to open up your eyes and make intentional awareness. Give yourself credit where credit's due. And it doesn't have to be a big accomplishment. It could be, look at this beautiful meal I created. What a cool conversation I just had with my grandson. How precious is this moment? You know, I just did something that 5 years ago would be unheard of. Yay me. Good on me. And we're so great at criticizing ourselves, and so not good at praising ourselves from so much conditioning and high standard expectations. And drop that and give ourselves credit where credit's due, and appreciate the blue sky, and appreciate, time being a little bit slowed down than it was prior, because there's so much good stuff out there. We just have to widen our lens, so that our lens is not just focused on, our knees and our frail elder. And the lens also sees the beautiful connections I have with the people that are still with me, and the parts of my body that are still optimally functioning, and in life, an opportunity. I say focus on what we can do, not what we can't do. Yeah.
I heard about a study one time where, you say to women, like, what are your accomplishments? And, people tend to say, I had 3
None.
kids. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done nothing.
Yeah.
And they were told, okay, so go ask your nearest and dearest what they think. And one woman with great trepidation asked her husband, thinking that he was just gonna, because if anybody was taking her for granted, it was probably him.
Yeah.
And I guess he was almost in tears, saying, "What are you talking about? You are the glue of this family. You know, you
Mm.
you've created the home, you hold it together, you're always there for all of us. You forgive me my sins, that sort of thing." And she was stunned to realize that so many, well, her whole family held her in like total high regard, and they were in awe of her strength and abilities.
Mm.
So that might even be something for people to do, is, and I've got a quote somewhere, I'm big on memes, but it said something about ask your friends what they think of you, because they get it. They see you for who you are,
I
whereas you look in the
love that,
mirror.
Agnes. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I'm
yeah,
going to incorporate that in with my work with women. That's just beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. One of the things I tell women is, when it comes to acknowledging something that they've done that they want to minimize, what would you say to your best friend who did that?
yeah,
What would you say to your best friend? You wouldn't blow it off or say it was nothing. You would say, awesome. That's great. I'm so proud of you. I mean, what a big deal. This is just incredible. And say, give yourself that. Because why should we
yeah,
treat ourselves any worse or any less than we treat our best friends?
yeah. No, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know what they'd say to you.
Yeah,
They'd
exactly.
say they'd say the same rave reviews.
Exactly.
Now, there's also a comment that I really like, and once you've described one midlife woman, you've described one midlife woman. We are all unique. We aren't just mid-age women. There's not one pot to put us all in. Can you talk to that?
Yeah. I think on the macro level, we're all facing a lot of the same things. We're all facing different flavors of loss and physical stuff and caregiving demands and invisibility. So on the macro level, we're similar in that many of us will confront, some of these things. But on the micro level, how that impacts us and what we do with it is tremendous. So huge variability. And even our menopause experience. I mean, I interviewed women where there's one woman who didn't even know she was in menopause, so she went into a physical, and her doctor came back and said, guess what, you're in menopause. She said, really? And then I interviewed women whose lives were turned upside down because they literally could not function. And so menopause was both a part of their worlds, but how it impacted them was drastically different. So to say we're all the same is really dismissive and rude. I mean, we go through a lot of the same things, but what we do with it is as unique as we are as individuals. Yeah.
Well, seeing as how this is my podcast and nobody can correct me, I've been fairly easy. I've had an easy time of it with the hormones and the rest of it. And I often say I was born before hormones were invented,
That's
and
funny.
so my comment about going through it quite easily. I'm sure there are people in my family, in my life, that would disagree with me, but that's okay.
That's funny. Yeah.
Now, your whole raison d'etre is embrace the middle.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? Tell us about embrace the middle. Like, I mean, we've
Embrace.
talked about it, but
Yeah, embracing is essentially saying it's gentle acceptance. Embracing is saying these things are going to happen in my life, and I don't really have a choice over certain things happening, but I have absolute choice how to respond to them. And embracing means acceptance in a gentle, mindful way. So I'll bring that to life for you. I'll bring it to life in a real colorful way. How the whole idea came to me was in a meditation retreat when I had my first hot flash, and it happened to be a hot meditation retreat in the afternoon of day 3 after lunch, which is always the hardest sitting block for me because you're tired and you're digesting lunch and it was super hot and you're cranky and I'm cranky and it was so anyway, so I already kind of in a cranky mood sit down for this meditation block, and the timekeeper goes to ring the bell, and in perfect synchronicity the hot flash starts to come on. And so, and mentally, it was, are you serious now? Of all times, I can't believe it. And my hair's not in a ponytail and I can't fan myself and blah, 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 which was not embracing. That was pushing away and complaining about something that was happening. Then it dawned on me that, oh, yeah, I'm in a meditation retreat. I'm supposed to be being present to what's going on. And so I made this choice to kind of tone down the complaining and just bring my attention to my body. And I just noticed the hot flash in a way that I'd never experienced it before. I noticed, the rising of the heat was like a ocean wave that crested and then subsided. And I could feel the heat kind of in the back of my neck. And I felt sweat go down the side of my cheek. It was just this very curious
mhm.
acceptance of the experience. And literally the timekeeper rang the bell to indicate the end of the 30-minute block. And I jumped. I was so engrossed in exploring my hot flash. And it wasn't a big deal. So pushing away the hot flash, I don't want you to go away. I want comfort. I don't want to feel heat. I want my hair off my head. I want comfort, was causing much more distress than just saying, okay, you're here, bring it on. Let me just see what you're all about. And so that led to this epiphany that midlife has a lot of things that most of us would rather push away. The challenges, the wrinkles and the weight gain and the knees and the death. None of us want that, but it's going to happen anyway. And so we can choose. Embracing means choosing to say, okay, you're here and this is hard, but I accept that you're here, and let's go through this. And so it's saying yes to life with presence, with tenderness, because there's a difference saying, okay, I accept that my knees are done and I have to stop running. Okay, I accept it, forget it. Or, okay, I have to retire from running and this is hard. And I'm putting my hand on my heart as an acknowledgement of tenderness. This is hard. That's much more gentle. And it doesn't change the experience, but it doesn't change what's happening, but it completely changes our experience of what's happening. So my invitation to women is to gently lean in, and my Embrace Middle book has a whole mindful process of how to do it, kind of a step-by-step process of how to embrace, and to embrace not only the difficulties, but to lean into and gently accept all the good stuff we talked about, because that deserves our attention as well.
Just out of curiosity, taking that time to really go inside and experience and explore and be aware of how that hot flash was controlling you, accessing your body, however you want to explain it. When you had your next one, what was that experience like? Could you go back there, or were you in a rush
I
and going, "Oh,
did.
come on"?
Yeah. I renamed them. I decided to give them a name. I called them mental pauses. So instead of menopause, mental pause. So the hot flashes to me became almost like the meditation bell to pause and be present. And I can't say I did it every time, but when I kind of was like, okay, ding, here's the meditation bell just to be present, it doesn't last very long. And it was just kind of pause and take a breath and tune in, and then it's over. And I'm not left with the aftermath of blah, 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 which it was when I was like, dramatically fanning myself or putting my head in a freezer. Go away, go away, go away. So yes, I was able to do that with much more ease. Not always, but often with much more ease than I did before I had that, what I call illuminating hot flash. That's a chapter in my book I call the illuminating hot flash, because it's the beginning of my story of embracing. It happened during that hot flash epiphany that I kind of decided that there are a lot of things that are going to happen besides hot flashes, And that pivotal moment was when my mother was diagnosed with dementia, and my oldest was a senior, and I was told by my orthopedic I had to retire from running, and there were a lot of things that were going to happen. And I thought, I have a choice point here. I can gracefully try to lean into these with presence and tenderness, or I can kick and scream and fight with my fighting gloves. But I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win. So I'm going to opt for A and make it a smoother ride. And that became, yeah.
I think too, your story is a really good one insofar as a lot of women might listen to what you just said about all those things that seem to hit all at once. And they said, oh, well, thank goodness that didn't happen to me because, I had this. And then the following year that happened. And well, 2 years later. So you can either sort of ease, maybe for lack of a better word, into whatever is next in terms of your frailties and your menopause and all that stuff. Or it's what came to mind when you were talking is like it's somebody flicked a switch in your life and said, guess what? Life as you knew it is going to cease to exist. And here's your
Yeah.
new reality. Get used to it.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get used to it when it's like flicking the switch and six things happen.
And we never know. We don't know when those
Yeah.
6 things are gonna happen. We don't know. I could never have imagined the compounding losses I had in one period. Could never have thought about it. And had someone told me, "You're gonna lose both parents and a brother in a matter of 2 years, and at the same time, your daughters are gonna launch, you're gonna have to have knee surgery, and your dog's gonna have to have knee surgery at the same time," I would have thought, "Nope, give that to someone else. I can't handle it." But that was my journey, and I had to. And so it was kind of my test to walk my talk. And so you get through it because you have to get through it. And I came out much stronger and more empowered than I ever knew I had within me, because I rode the wave. I didn't dodge it. I
And
stayed
and
very,
kudos to you for saying
thank you.
this is really crappy, but
Yeah.
I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to deal with it the best way I can because this too will pass.
And because I have a choice over that. I don't have a choice over them dying
Yeah.
or my kids leaving or any of that, but I have absolute choice over how I'm going to choose to proceed with this and manage it. And that's where some of the power came from. Yeah. Yeah.
What is soft?
Oh, thank you for asking. It's the how to embrace. It's the mindful process of how to embrace. It's an acronym, and it can take a minute to do. And you can do it towards something challenging, towards something happy, towards a moment in time when you're just feeling weird and don't know why. And so the S stands for slow down and breathe. And the O stands for observe your thoughts without joining them. So watch what your monkey mind, as we call it in Buddhism, is doing, but without going down the monkey road with it. Just watch to see what's going on in that busy mind. F is feel into your body, because when we feel into our body, we're in present. Thoughts are usually not present. Thoughts are past or future. They're seldom present. So that step 3, that F, gets us back into present. T is the tenderness part, the self-compassion, where acknowledging that whatever's on your plate is either challenging or wonderful or somewhere in between, and just acknowledging what it is and giving yourself some compassion. And sometimes it stops there. And the last T, should you need it, is the tuning into our inner wisdom, because that lives within us. And if we get still, even for a minute, and quiet and slow down that monkey mind, a lot of times we can access that inner teacher that knows what to say, such as this too shall pass. because when we're in the moment and spinning from something challenging, we think it's the end of the world because we're caught in it. And when we slow down and take a breath and look at how kind of catastrophic those thoughts can be and say, this is really hard, then we'll realize, okay, this is hard, but I will get through it because I've been through it before, and this too shall pass. That's soft.
Thank you. The very first time I used "this too shall pass" was in the middle of what I would call a fairly hard delivery of my first child, and looking
Wow.
out into the hospital parking lot, and it was pitch dark, and it was just, and you could see the lights, but whatever. And I just kept on thinking, Dawn is going to come, she'll be here, and this too will pass. And 40 years later, I have this amazing daughter, so it passed
Wow.
in a great way, but just, like just knowing that this too will pass. Like you just got to get through it. Um,
That's
you know,
extraordinary, Agnes, that you had that wherewithal in labor, to actually have that insight. That's really impressive that you were
well,
able to acknowledge that. Yeah.
let me say too, when I had my second child, my son, I did tell my doctor to get the F out of my vision line. I apologized to him later. But anyways, you had
I'm
an
sure he's heard
interesting
it
talking.
before.
Yeah, no, exactly. He was lovely. You had an interesting talking point, and as the mother of daughters, I'm going to ask what I think we've talked about it, but what do you wish your elders would have told you about midlife before you got there? This too shall
This
pass.
too shall pass. That it's going to feel like a storm. It's going to feel like puberty again because that's the same hormonal, chaos. And you will get through it. And there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. And this too shall pass. Yeah, I really believe that.
Talking about my doctor, I remember when I turned 40, he said the one thing you're going to notice is that it's not just your parents' friends who are dying now. It's going to be your friends who are beginning to pass.
Yeah,
And it was so true. It was, yeah, it's
yeah,
beginning
yeah.
of the next chapter. And don't
Yep.
anybody out there ever say it's the beginning of the end. It's not.
Nope. Nope.
I'm going to live forever, and so far, so good.
Yep.
What haven't we talked about that you want midlife women all over the world to think about?
Wow, I think we covered a lot. I just want
Okay.
midlife women to stand tall, be visible, use our voices, step into our power, and claim it because we will be stronger in numbers, and our voices are louder the more of us speak up, and we don't have to suffer. There's resources and help, including your girl, not just hormone replacement therapy if that's the route you choose, but each other, and embrace it. And you can, if you want some help on the whole bracing thing, you can buy my book called Embrace the Middle. And and yeah, you have a choice, and
Okay.
choose the smoother ride.
I do want to add here too that so often it's easy when you say use your voice and speak out. Like this is the wise woman in me talking, is it's really easy to just sort of throw your hands up and yell WTF. But when you bring it down a notch from that and say, like maybe there's a reason this has happened, or what is their story, or like there's just to bring it down and sort of be more inquiring without, I mean, obviously you stand up for yourself and you get that point across,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be flying off the handle.
No,
So,
no.
yeah.
I was in a computer store the other day, and I got in there and was kind of waiting, and the guy was on the phone, and it was like a young, maybe a boy in his like 20s, young man, and then another gentleman comes in, and he saw me. Another man comes in, maybe 10 or 20 years my senior, and the kid gets off the phone and turns to the man first and said, can I help you? And I sat there for a second, and then I'm like, excuse me, I was actually here first. So I'd like to be helped first. And I don't know if it was just you defer to men first. It felt like, a moment where I can just sit there and wait. But why should I wait? And why should I not be serve first. And it's a small thing, but it was a small thing, but it was something that, annoyed me, and that this kid needed to know that wasn't okay. So by calling him out on it, it's also telling him that, no, we're not gonna accept being second in line just because we're female. So I think that's just a small example.
And you said computer store, right?
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that I am really good at some things on the computer. There are other things that you can explain it to me 6 ways to Sunday and I still don't get it. And because a lot of people who work in those stores are very adept, it's like, oh God, here comes a mid-age woman. I'm going to explain it to her 14 times and she's still not going to understand it. And I've actually been known to say, okay, you talk faster than I can listen. If you explain this to me in a normal speed, I'll get it. But those are the thoughts that came to mind when you said that
Yeah.
he saw you and then looked right through you.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Exactly.
okay, so you've been trying to squeeze this in, and now it's your turn. You wrote a book.
Oh, I think I squeezed it in. I think I did a good job
What?
squeezing it
Well,
in.
wait, no. Tell us about your book now. So you start out with
It's everything we talked about. I
okay,
start out, part one is about what this concept of embracing is and what the middle is, kind of what we talked about
yeah,
throughout this conversation, and an overview and introduction to what this soft process is. Because I'm both a psychologist and a longtime meditator, 20-year meditator, and it kind of combines those worlds. Part two of the book talks about the research, both with hard data and lots of stories from women in their voices and in their words. And it talks about the pain points, it talks about the gifts, and it talks about, illustrates how to apply soft to both, and that invitation to really be present to both. And then part three of the book is changing the narrative moving forward. And it addresses things like, ageism and sexism and menopause, the need to speak up and use our voices at menopause, midlife beauty, invisibility, and using our voices to change the narrative, not just for ourselves, but for our daughters and granddaughters and generations to come. That is embrace the middle. Yeah.
okay. And is it available sort of everywhere, or do we go to your website for that?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon. It's on Amazon. The workbook is not mine. Someone copyright infringed it, so do not buy the workbook. But the book is on Amazon. I'm working on getting it taken down. And yeah, some bookstores have it. My
Is it
website,
available on your website?
it is
Okay. It's just that
embracethemiddle.com.
I always yeah. So okay, yeah. So website is embracethemiddle.com. You're on
Uh-huh.
social?
I'm on social.
Okay.
Facebook, Embrace the Middle. Instagram, my name, Shayna Kaufmann. I'm on LinkedIn. And yeah, those three.
Okay. I
Yeah,
just always put links in, and I'm just looking at your page here. You've got a whole page with the book. So we'll just send them there first, and then they can take it from there. And then
awesome.
they're sure to get the right one. Yeah, there's a link here now available on Amazon. So that will go to your book, not the interloper.
Correct. Yeah.
Before we close, may I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
In your CV or on your CV, it's in your CV, I think. You have forensic psychologist. That
Yes.
sounds like a TV drama. Can you tell us a little bit about that
Yes.
part?
That was career one. That was the first half. Yeah. I first got my clinical degree, and I came from a family of both lawyers, judges, social workers, psychologists.
Cool.
And so I kind of morphed the two. And I was very curious about kind of the offender world and why people would do what they do. So I ended up developing this niche in forensic psychology. So my job would be to I'd get hired by attorneys on both sides, sometimes prosecutors, all criminal work, mostly criminal work, 80%, sometimes prosecutors, sometimes defense. And I would go into the jails and I would read their files, which were like mini crime novels with pictures and all. And then I would go interview the defendants, and sometimes I testify in court about it, and I'd write long reports. And I did this for 25 years. Testified in court, met a lot of people, have a lot of stories. And what I will say is that people in the legal system are human beings, and I try to connect with them as human beings, that their last chapter is not their proudest or best chapter, the chapter that landed them in jail. And that what I set out to do was really to try to get the story of the person that led up to what they did, rather than thinking that I'm just looking at a thief or a murderer or a pedophile or whatever they're charged with. And so it was very interesting, dark work. And it was work that was great when my kids were young, because I could go to school and be on the PTA by day and go to jails at night or on the weekends, because my clients were not going anywhere. They weren't going anywhere, and they were available 24/7. So it was
So
a career that that I enjoyed for a period of time, and that was very interesting, but increasingly became very dark over time. So it was a career that I knew at some point I had to leave. Yeah.
given the fact we've all seen Silence of the Lambs, have you ever been scared of somebody?
There was one time, and I did this for 25 years. There was there are two times. One time I'm in the cell, and you're in a very small kind of room that they're looking at you, the guards, and the room's locked. And usually the person on the other side of the table in the middle is handcuffed, but it's a small room. So, and the guy was charged with murder, and it was murder when he was in a very intoxicated, drug-induced state. It was still murder. And he was very agitated. And so he's pacing. And so as he's pacing, I'm feeling my kind of anxiety rise with him. And then he stops pacing and looks at me and he said, "Are you scared being in the room with the murderer?" And I looked at him and I said, "Should I be?" And he paused and he goes, "No." And then he continued to pace, and I was just inside, just sweating bullets and very anxious. So that was one. Nothing has ever happened to me, by the way. The other time was when they had a power surge in the jail, and so all the lights went on. It's pitch dark, and I'm in the cell with a guy, and I don't know how long it went on for. And he was as uncomfortable as I was. And the lights came back on, but that definitely, I could feel my blood pressure rise on that one. But nothing ever happened to me. I was never threatened. I was never physically hurt. But there were times when the hair would stand up on my arms, and the kind of psychopath alert factor would go into high gear.
All your spidey senses?
Spidey senses. Yep. Spidey
Oh,
senses on
Lord.
high alert. Yeah. But as a psychologist, that's data. As a psychologist, that's my body telling me something. I wouldn't write that in a report. My spidey senses were off the charts, but that would be part of my inner assessment of what was going on. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked for just over an hour now, and the bottom line
Yeah.
is go take a psychology course, because that explains everything. Your spidey senses will explain everything.
Don't even take a course, just listen to it.
Yeah,
You don't have to
right.
do yours. Just be aware of it.
Oh, dear. Okay, your website link is in the show notes, and all the links are on your page at our website. Listeners, by my definition, we are all midlife. Are you good with that? Have there been a few bumps in the road? Have there been some great highlights? Talk to us. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at boomwithabang.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and talk to us there. Maybe something Shayna said caught your attention and I didn't follow up the way you'd hoped. Tell me in the comments and I'll get you an answer. Share this episode. Like I said, we're all midlife. That could be scary, that could be empowering, that could be confusing. In all cases, it's all new to each of us. By sharing this episode, conversations will start, and as women, much of our power is in our sisterhood. And Shayna has certainly given us some positives to contemplate with our sisters. Leave stars and reviews where you can. I say that every week. One day you'll actually do it. They do help us grow. You can support this podcast by buying me a coffee. That's a pretty cheap option. Link is in the show notes and above Shayna's head on her page at our website. I'm registered at Substack. That way, if you follow there, you get an email when the new episode comes out. Shayna Kaufmann, thank you for being my guest today and emphasizing the positives and encouraging us to embrace the middle.
Thank you so much, Agnes. An absolute delight being here. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the week.